is 5:35. I now call the, what do we call this? The Subcommittee of the Expanded Access to Arts and Cultural meeting to order. City Clerk, would you please conduct roll call? Present. I can't hear you in the mic.
Chair McCoy,
Present.
Commissioner Ward,
Present.
Thank you. I have a question.
No. You may not hurt just to mention.
Okay, so we did have one of our commissioners, Commissioner Trelio, resign recently for personal reasons. So our subcommittee will be looking for one of our other commissioners to serve in his place. Until then, it'll just be myself and Vice Chair Ward for tonight. And we now will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. We will start with the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or proposed changes to the agenda, City Clerk?
an attachment was added to ID 26544, ID 26551, ID 26552, and ID 26553 as a supplement packet.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Also move.
Thank you. I'll second it. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. This item is approved. We will now move on to member comments. Vice Chair Ward, do you have any comments for the audience?
No, thank you.
Well, I do. I would like to extend an invite to an event that I am putting on, bringing out my colleague, Dr. Bruce Strubble. He will be talking to us about how diverse Fresno is and how important it is for us to all work together, giving us some new tools to organize with and how to advocate for ourselves. I'm very excited for this event. It's going to be May 16th at Fresno City College in the old administration building on University. And the event is from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and it's free and lunch will be served. So I hope to see some of you guys out there to enjoy this exciting young man. I'm going to go ahead and ask, does anyone from the park staff have any comments for the subcommittee?
Chair McCoy, none at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to unscheduled communication. Would any member of the public like to speak on any issue within the jurisdiction of this subcommittee? You will have up to 3 minutes. If you would like to make a comment regarding a scheduled hearing, comments will be taken when the hearing is called. Okay, Johannes.
Thank you, subcommittee. Once again, thank you for having these properly within the Brown Act as they should be. Once again, leaving my comments for the grant guideline to their proper spot in the agenda. I want to speak towards essentially the Measure P ordinance, specifically subsection 4A. The Measure P grant, 12% of the funds will be made available on an annual basis. Those two words, annual basis. My understanding, as reported from park staff, is that the reason that this rush to get to the June 30th deadline is specifically because of these two words, or is exclusively because of these two words, annual basis in subsection 4A. My confusion with that is that's a lot to put on just two words, frankly. And as y'all work very hard to rush towards this deadline, and as the community rushes to have availability to engage with this deadline, like you expressed in the last subcommittee meeting, I have concerns that this will be done on time or properly on time. And frankly, I do think that there is precedent. Subsection 4C, Subsection 4C, the commission shall work in partnership with the Fresno Arts Council or its successor. That's already been broken with good reason. The extenuating circumstances has caused the city to break that contract, to break this ordinance, air quotes, due to extenuating circumstances with the embezzlement and the foul play by Fresno Arts Council, and is now doing the best it can on its own. Likewise, those extenuating circumstances should extend to moving past this June 30th. Those two words, annual basis, do not in and of themselves define June 30th. And moreover, even if they did, we have extenuating circumstances to allow for more time for y'all to actually go through this properly and with care, and to engage the community, engage the community properly, so the community can actually be like fully a part of this. A lot of us are very passionate about commenting, but we're a small handful. This is not all of the community. And as much as I like the sound of my own voice, I don't think I'm the only one that should be heard. I think that this should be equitably engaged with the entire community. So again, I urge you to extend that deadline. That legal definition doesn't make any sense, especially compared to what we've already done to break, air quotes, the ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any more cards? The cards. Thank you. Do we have anyone online for unscheduled communication? No? Okay, I will go ahead and close out unscheduled communication.
I want to speak to what I seen. I was observing online for what was it? I think one of the last meetings, the 20th, I believe. I know it's a little bit different in and of itself, but there was somebody who was making a comment online, and that person had gotten cut off, and they had simply stated their name in maybe a sentence or so before they got cut off and told that it wasn't the right time, I guess, for whatever they assumed at that time they were going to say. And I'd like to say, or I'd really have a problem with that, because whoever was controlling, I guess, the person sitting here doesn't know what that person was going to say, and felt like it was just up to them to cut them off. And so I think that shows a lack of competence, and that really just would have pissed me off if that was me. So, yeah. So I'd like to know the reason for doing that. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I have you fill out a card, please? It's fine. It's fine. We're going to move on to, I'm going to close unscheduled communication. We're going to move on to discussion items. As a reminder, discussion items will be heard by the public. Opportunity to comment on the EAAC Grant Program Cycle 3 will be during the hearing portion of the meeting. ID number 26-544, discussion establishment of future EAAC subcommittee meetings. The subcommittee must establish a calendar of meetings to complete the review of the Cycle 3 EAAC grant lines. Begin the discussion amongst the park staff and subcommittee. So we have the calendar. I'm still getting used to the script. I'm reading everything on it.
So there's going to be a calendar that pops up right now. Good evening, Commissioners. Sarah Gaitan, Program Manager for the Parks Department. In front of you, you have the May 2026 calendar. These are all proposed times or proposed dates, but for the most part, some of them are pretty established. As you can see, today we have our subcommittee number 2. On April 30th, which is tomorrow, our guideline comments will be closing online at 3 p.m. Just a reminder, you can still go on the website and drop a comment there for any changes, edits, anything that you would like to see on the grant guidelines for Cycle 3. The following week, we will take some time to compile all of the comments, and again, they will be uploaded onto the website for everybody to see all of those comments. We will spend a few days next week doing that, and on the 7th, we are going to be publishing the agenda for, sorry, I need to jump ahead and then come back on this week. So we are proposing that there is another subcommittee meeting on the 2nd week of May, which is what we can discuss today. And depending on what day that lands on, we will determine when the agenda is published for that proposed subcommittee meeting on that 2nd week of May. On May 8th, we will be closing the scoring committee handbook comments that have opened up already online. As of today, people can also go online and leave a comment the way that they have been for the grant guidelines. That will close on May 8th at 3 p.m. also. And we will work through that Friday and the weekend to compile those comments for the handbook. So for that 2nd week of May, is there a day that works so that we could establish a 3rd subcommittee meeting? You want to stick to Wednesdays? Does that work for both of you?
Sure, I'll move things around.
Wednesday? Okay.
Sarah, will it be here in this?
I can see if the room is available, and then I will get back to you all to see if we will be in chambers or in the 2165 room.
Chair McCoy,
And-
do you have a preference on chambers or meeting room A? If Wednesday, if this is not available, are you okay with meeting room A, or would you prefer Tuesday or Monday?
No, I would prefer to keep it on Wednesday.
Okay.
It's better for me, so if we're not able to be in the chambers, then we'll be
You're
back
good
in the
with meeting
room that
room
we
A?
were in the first time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And keep it at 5:30?
Yes. That way, if any of our community residents want to engage in the conversation, they could come over straight from work.
That's fine. So then with that being on a Wednesday, then our agenda will be published on the Friday the 8th. So I will be moving that date over there.
And will there be a meeting set?
We will send out an invite for the agenda conference.
Okay, thank you.
And then moving along here, okay, that's the 3rd week of May. On the 14th, we will be publishing the agenda for the PRAC meeting. And following that will be the PRAC meeting on the 18th, when we will be bringing guidelines to you along with all of the comments that have been collected throughout the weeks in April and partially of May. On May 21st, okay, now I need to jump ahead again. So going into the 5th week of May, I know that there is a holiday on the 25th. We would like to propose a special PRAC meeting. We do need to incorporate the rest of PRAC for this.
Yeah, we do. It's just a comment.
Just
that,
a heads up.
For
Yeah.
Monday on the 25th? Or for when?
No, that week.
That week, okay.
Yes.
So either the 26th, 27th, 28th,
So
or 29th.
depending on the 18th, whatever day we land on for that following week for a special meeting, then we will adjust this calendar with when we will be publishing the agenda.
So right now, when you see in front of you on the 21st proposed PRAC special meeting, that should say agenda released. That got cut off, apologies. But depending on the date that you all if you're able to consider a special meeting on the 18th for the standing prac meeting, sometime the week of the 26th, we forecast that we would release an agenda on the 21st.
And we're doing a special meeting because of the budget?
For
Yes.
both the budget and the guidelines.
Okay.
Okay. So we have established that on the 13th, we will have the third subcommittee meeting. Do you all have any other dates that you would like to meet for the subcommittee meeting? Any other dates that you would like to place on the calendar?
As long as we can keep them on the Wednesday, I think that works best. But it seems like we're doing them every other week.
Okay.
So we can keep them like that, just to be transparent. Unless we don't have anything to report or anything to share, then we can move to bi-weekly.
Okay. Would you like to move forward with making a schedule of every other week for the next couple months?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Alrighty. That is it for this item, and I will provide an updated calendar soon.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next discussion item, ID number 26-552, discussion on draft application review committee handbook for EAAC Cycle 3. Would someone from the Parks Department please begin the presentation?
I think you may have skipped a line. This is the presentation.
Oh, I skipped a whole item. Okay.
That's all right. Shana, if you could switch the...
I'm still
There you go.
trying to get used to this
That's all right.
script. Okay, let's back up. I do apologize. We're going to go ahead and go to discussion item ID 26-551, discussion update on community listening sessions for the expanded access to arts and cultural program. Will someone from the Parks Department please begin this presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. Sarah Gaitan, Program Manager for the Parks Department. I will be providing an update today on the listening sessions for the Expanded Access to Arts and Culture program. I will start off by explaining a little bit about the community listening session format and how we conducted the sessions. We gave everybody a brief overview of the Measure P ordinance specific to Section 7-1506 in regards to the expenditure plan that focused on the expanded access to arts and culture portion. Everybody in attendance was split up into 4 groups. Each of the 4 groups had a topic of discussion. Group number 1 discussed grant guidelines. Group number 2 discussed application review and scoring. Group number 3 discussed fiscal sponsorship and eligibility. And group number 4 gave open feedback and discussed any other topics that they wanted to talk about. This was open discussion. What they did was whatever comments they had, they would write them on a sticky note and we collected them. And we have taken those comments and added them to our larger spreadsheet where we are adding all of those comments. Each group had a different color sticky note, so we're able to identify which sticky note belongs to which of the topics. Like I mentioned, the comments are being added to the main comment list, which is now available online, and we are trying to keep that updated on a weekly basis. An overview of the listening sessions is pictured here. When this presentation was created, we had not completed session number 3 yet. So I'm going to, with session 1 and 2 on April 22nd and on the 25th, they were held at Ted C. Wills and Maxiel Parks. At that time, we had 14 in-person attendees and 4 online with a total of 18. And a total of 208 comments were collected. And you can see off to the side there how many comments were collected per topic. As of yesterday, I'll give you an update here. We had 401 comments on sticky notes. We had a total of 58 participants, 42 in person and 16 virtual. And if you want a breakdown of what the popular topics were, grant guidelines had 110 comments. Fiscal sponsorship and eligibility had 80 comments. Open feedback and other topics had 96 comments, and application review and scoring had 115.
Numbers again, please.
Yeah.
Grant guidelines.
Grant guidelines was 110. Fiscal sponsorship was 80. Open feedback and other topics was 96. And application review and scoring was 115.
And altogether, there were 58 people that attended,
Correct.
and 42 were in person,
Correct.
and 16 were online,
Virtual.
virtual. Thank you.
Our online comment form has been up since the 15th of April. As of the 28th, there was 139 comments on there. As a reminder, the comment form is still available until April 30th, 2026 at 3 p.m., which is tomorrow. I did check it today, and as of today, we do have 162 comments on there. So it's slowly rising. And off to the left there, you'll see a table where we have highlighted the top 3 topics that comments are being left for. So the top 3 comments would be available funding and funding allocations, eligibility, and application review and scoring process.
So in person, has any of the people who attended in person state anything in regards to the timeline? Because I only see 10 comments, but what's
Well,
the
when they,
conversation?
under the topic of grant guidelines, that grant guidelines covered all of the entire grant guidelines, so it covered all the topics in there.
Was there any
there.
concern of the timeline being June 30th, if you can tell me that?
I was not a part of that particular group, but they are all the comments are online right now, and you can check by sessions and see they are also broken down by what category they're a part of.
Thank
And
you.
if I could just add, there were comments expressing the need for urgency to make the funds available, but then there's also comments tweaking some of the deadlines for the different milestones of like when things would be due. So it's a mixed amount of comments, but reading through is really helpful if you get an opportunity to go in there.
Thank you.
Okay, digital outreach and promotion that has been done for the listening sessions. We did send out a total of 6 emails to over 14,800 recipients. We did have a total of 3 posts online, which brought in 16,175 combined views and 636 combined interactions. And here you'll see just this image gives some insight as to how our emails have been doing in comparison to other organizations that are in our industry, which is the government industry. The benchmark is at about 39%, and our emails have been averaging about 36% open rate. So they've been doing fairly well. We have identified this as a good means of communication for people who are interested in this particular program.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what was this slide for, just to show that people are emailing in comments or, yeah.
That our emails are being opened
Okay.
and clicked on when they are sent out instead of being thrown in the trash.
On the trash. Got it, sent to trash.
Yes. Okay. Another form of communication is also our website. When you land on the homepage for the Fresno.gov website, you will see a red banner across the top. That red banner will take you directly to the Expanded Access to Arts and Culture program page. On that page, you will be able to find tabs for meetings, an area for you to give your feedback, any related documents, and also how to communicate with us. And under meetings, we have been putting all future dates, all meetings that will be happening, and we have uploaded some of the videos there. We still need to upload 2 more of the listening sessions on that, and then we will also upload this meeting from today, but those should be up within the next couple of days. As mentioned before, the community comment form for Cycle 3 draft grant guidelines is still online. You can see there what it looks like. April 30th will be the closing date. Anything that you would like to leave a comment on regarding the grant guidelines can be left there. It gives you an option to scroll through which topic you want to speak on so that you can narrow down what comments are related to each of the sections of the grant guidelines. And then as of today, we have a new comment form online. And this comment form will be for Cycle 3 Draft Application Review and Scoring Handbook, which we will be reviewing today. Community members wishing to submit a comment on the proposed Application Review Committee Handbook may submit a comment in writing via the online portal. The form will be available until May 8th at 3 p.m., and the website is listed there. And that will conclude my presentation. I'll open for any other questions that you may have.
So if we were to tweak the timeline for different buckets, Shelby, how would that look?
You mean the notice of funding opportunity and releasing it at different times for different project types? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
So the opinion that we've gotten is that we need to release a notice of funding opportunity for this entire cycle by June 30th. There are a lot of comments about staggering the different types, and we see those very clearly. And I think that's helpful feedback. But we are operating under the legal opinion that we've received that the notice needs to go out on the 30th. I think a lot of these comments, since they're all going to be public and we'll keep files, could definitely inform future cycles as well, because we see, that request. But we're operating under the legal opinion that we've received.
I think that we're seeing a lot of that request is because of the recent activity that happened with round 2. So it feels like round 3 is like a rushed process. Even though last meeting you did a really good job going through the guidelines page by page, but again, I did have concerns about the timeline because it does seem like it's a rushed process. So I'm just trying to see, is there any way that we can maybe push it out a month or anything like that? It just feels like a rushed process, and it feels like that it's gonna be a rush process. I appreciate all the comments that's coming from our community members in regards to all the buckets that we've seen from the presentation from Sarah today. But I just really have a problem with the timeline, and it's really concerning to me. So I just want to state that.
Yeah, Shelby, is it possible that you ask for clarification from legal about how they're interpreting the multiple solicitations language together with that, annual language? Because it seems, it might be this year not available based on timing, but it does seem like the multiple solicitations language would allow for staggering or multiple opportunities. So I was wondering, maybe we could get clarification on that.
Yeah, and it does read that way. The challenge I think that we're facing is that a solicitation has not been done yet in this fiscal year. And so we are trying to open all of the multiple solicitations by the 30th based on the legal opinion, but we can certainly take that back to legal counsel and see if there's any wiggle room there. It is definitely a very demanding process on our team, so I understand the community wanting some more space to participate. I will say, though, if we could just commend all of those who have given comments, attended virtually, attended a meeting in person. We had, I think, our biggest turnout last night, 40 some odd folks with lots of comments, really helpful. So thank you to those who have been able to engage.
Thank you. I have no more questions. Vice Chair, you have any questions?
Okay,
All right,
thank
we're
you.
gonna Move on to the next item. That would be ID number 26-552, discussion of the draft application review committee handbook for EAAC Cycle 3. Will someone from the Parks Department please begin the presentation?
All right, so this one will be for me, and if you'll indulge me to sit up here because we'll have a lot of things to go over. So this presentation is going to give an overview, and then the next item is going to go through the handbook page by page. I know we did that with the grant guidelines, and we got some feedback that that was helpful, and so that was the approach we'd like to take as well here. Thank you, Cheyenne. Just as a reminder, the purpose of the subcommittee is to assist and provide input and recommendations to the commission related to the grant guidelines. So our focus tonight, once again, will be on that Cycle 3. So as stated, we're going to go ahead and give that overview. Go ahead, next slide, of the handbook. So staff have worked to draft the application review handbook to be used to guide a transparent and competitive scoring process for EAC Cycle 3. The draft has been informed by comments received to date and best practices in public administration. Once again, as I stated in our past subcommittee meeting, feedback is welcome and encouraged on all sections of the draft. And we understand that that will take a little bit of time, and so to allow that time rather than closing the comments tomorrow with the other items, space for public comment has been extended through May 8th. I will also say that this item will likely come before PRAC on the 18th as well, so although these public comment periods are closing, there is still space for your feedback during other PRAC meetings as well. So. The handbook is posted to our website and as a supplement to this item. Copies should be available in the back if you have not already grabbed one. Those are there. And I'll just give a brief overview of each section, and then we'll move to the next item to go over in more detail. But essentially, the handbook includes the purpose of the tool, the roles and responsibilities of the parties that are involved in the application review, a discussion on the member application, so being part of the scoring committee and that selection process. Language discussing conflict of interest, which is very stringent. And also there is a section on required trainings. And then it gets into more of the details. There's different graphics included to help further illustrate the proposed process, but we're proposing a process where we would form different groups that would be used to score. And then the grant application review and redaction process, as well as the steps that it would go through as the application is reviewed by the scoring groups. And then finally, a closing section on the commitment to a competitive and transparent process. So these images are pulled out of the handbook itself. We tried to include some visuals just to assist with visualizing the process. I hope that going over it in detail in the next item will help everyone to get familiar. But this outlines the time commitment that would be expected of the ARC members through training, through application review and preliminary scoring, and then through a public review meeting process. And then I'm pointing out this visual as well because as I talk, I may be gesturing about groups and all these things. This is probably the image that you'll want to look at in the draft because it outlines how members would be assigned to groups in a very formal process with alternates also being identified. I believe those are all the slides for this presentation, so if you'll indulge me, Chair, if we could go through the handbook. And then one of the things about this one, I know with the other process, we went through page by page and commented page by page. But because there's multiple overlapping items in this, if we could go through the full handbook and then come back to questions, would you be all right with that? Okay.
That's fine.
So we will switch to that item if you want to.
I have to announce it, huh?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Why we just can't switch? All right, we're going to go ahead and discuss ID number 26-553, discussion on the EAAC Cycle 3 Draft Grant Guideline Review. Will someone from the Parks Department please begin the presentation?
All right, so I'll be going over this again. Shelby McNabb, Assistant Director in the Parks Department. I'm going to go over in detail page by page, section by section, and folks who may be listening online, these documents are linked for you on the website if you'd like to follow along, but we'll also be putting the page up. It's a little small if you're reading from your chair, so copies are available in the back there. All right, so page 2, this one's easy. We'll fix the broken link there, but that is just the table of contents. We'll go to page 3. So the purpose of this handbook is to guide the steps that will be followed to facilitate a transparent and competitive review and scoring process. The high-level roles and responsibilities here are outlined in section 2 on that same page. And there are multiple parties that are involved in this process. The commission is listed here because they're responsible for overseeing implementation of the scoring process to ensure that grant applications are reviewed in a transparent and competitive process, and then also hearing and considering appeals. That's the same function that was conducted from PRAC last go around. The application review committee members at a high level are responsible to apply to be on the ARC, complete required training and conflict of interest reporting, review the handbook, grant guidelines, and scoring rubrics, which would also be reviewed with them as part of training, and we'll get into those details as the pages go on. Review and score applications using the scoring rubrics that will be adopted as part of the guidelines, and then participate in discussion and submit the final scores. And then you can see here Parks' role is outlined. I want to just restate that Parks will not be scoring. That was stated in a prior meeting, and just want to make clear that Parks staff will not be scoring any of the applications. As proposed, they will be facilitating but not scoring. So Parks will be responsible to share the application widely to ensure that the composition of the ARC is diverse and representative. We would also be responsible for ensuring that members meet the requirements that are outlined in the grant guidelines, whatever those final requirements are. We would schedule training for the ARC members and track training completion, schedule and facilitate the review meetings as part of a public process, assign ARC groups and applications for review using a randomized process, and facilitate a structured, transparent, and competitive scoring process following the handbook and grant guidelines. Moving on to page 4. We would also collect and monitor conflict of interest disclosures and assign alternate scoring members as necessary, consulting with the city attorney's office as applicable. We would collect and anonymize scoring sheets and then distribute those scoring sheets that are anonymous to the applicants upon completion of cycle 3 so that they could see how their proposals had scored. We would track attendance and process stipends for the ARC members who complete all of the requirements of service and respond to questions or issues not contemplated in this handbook using sound professional judgment, but also documenting any such actions to ensure transparency. So we've done our best to outline the potential different scenarios and looking forward to public feedback on anything that we may have missed, but we would have a responsibility to work through anything that was not quite contemplated. So the member application and selection process, interested applicants would complete an application and would need to meet the following criteria: being available to attend all of the required trainings and meetings. Parks would provide a preliminary schedule at the time of application so that folks could check their calendars to check their availability. They would need to meet the criteria for reviewers outlined in the grant guidelines, submit their application on time, and disclose any potential conflicts of interest first at the time of application and then again throughout the review and scoring process, so that if they had an unanticipated conflict come up once applications were assigned, they could identify that and recuse themselves. We're also requiring that the members would demonstrate a commitment to a transparent and competitive process, not be a grant applicant or under fiscal sponsorship. Parks would then review the applications and make selections based on the information provided, and interviews may be required. Applicants or fiscal sponsors that submit a grant application would not be permitted to participate on the ARC. And then any interested party not selected to participate on the ARC may appeal to PRAC, so that any interested party, if they felt that they should have been selected, they could come to PRAC to make that appeal in a public process. So as I'm going through, if you don't mind highlighting or making comments to yourself, because we're going to come back, but I just like to keep going. So conflict of interest. For the purposes of this process, we are proposing really a very stringent conflict of interest litmus test here. A potential conflict could be economic, personal, professional, relational, or otherwise. It could be a conflict or perceived conflict. So you may not legally have a conflict, but if there's a perception, just being cognizant of that. And you can see there a list of different things that may be a conflict. If you have relationships, if you have some personal finances maybe tied to the grant that's being proposed. So there's a list there in that paragraph. But essentially what we're getting at is a conflict of interest that's maybe even not listed, but might lead to the perception of bias or predetermination in application review. Any undisclosed conflict may compromise the integrity of the process. So when in doubt, what we're saying is that ARC members should choose to recuse themselves if they find that they may have any potential conflict, and that carries over onto page 5. So the training that's required mirrors what's listed in the draft grant guidelines there in section 5. Prior to initiating scoring, we would require that ARC members and park staff involved in facilitating the process would be required to complete the following training: implicit bias and ethics in public service, have an orientation on fair and impartial grant application review, which would cover the rubrics and best practices when reviewing. It would go over this handbook and then also go over the conflict of interest disclosures, what they are, how to know when you might have one. If you think you might have one, you just might have one. So how you would recuse yourself in that process. The ARC member commitment is highlighted here as well. It is currently estimated that participating on this committee would require time commitment of a minimum, really, of 38 hours or more over a several-week period. They would receive a stipend for completion of training, reviewing, and scoring grant applications, though members who do not complete the entire service would not receive the stipend. So this was included based on some preliminary feedback. Comments are still coming in. But just recognizing the time commitment that this would entail and including some form of compensation for that. It's outlined again in that graphic that was on the prior slide, but they would have between 4 to 8 hours of training. They would then read up to 30 applications and score using the rubrics, which we anticipate would be between 30 to 40 hours, estimating around an hour per application or more, depending on, folks, the time that it would take them to review and score. Everyone's different, so that's an estimate. And then the review meeting where we would discuss grant applications to finalize scores, we're anticipating between 4 to 6 hours, depending on the number of applications that are received. Moving on to page 6, the group formation. So this gets into how we would split the members into groups. I will note that on this section, item number 1, in the draft grant guidelines, we currently had estimated 20 to 25 reviewers, but after some initial feedback and looking at the number of proposals, we're proposing actually a number that is 30 members, and I'll get into why. What we would propose to do is that we would use randomization, so using either a computer tool or just the old school pull it out of a hat, and assign 25 of those members to groups A through E. So you'll see in the graphic below on page 6, there would be group A through E, and within those groups, 5 members contained within each. There would also be 5 trained alternates, and that would be the group available in the event of a resignation, illness, recusal, or absence. We heard from the community so far in the comments that we've received that they'd like to see more people on the panel rather than 3, which is in the grant guidelines currently. So I included 5 in this draft. However, we did also include language that would allow parks to reduce the minimum number of reviewers per group/proposal down to 3. And the reason for including that option is because if the number of grant applications received exceeds 150, if there's something unexpected and there's several members who are unable to fulfill their commitment, we would like to act in the public interest to avoid unnecessary delays by having a minimum of 3 reviewers. But if you have feedback on that section, really appreciate your thoughts there. We'd like to aim for 5, plan for 5, build everything around 5, but in the event that we get 300 applications, we may need to have a smaller subsection there. So the graphic is supposed to help break all of that out to show how the splits would work. Moving on to page 7. This outlines the application review and scoring process in more detail. What we are proposing is that as a first step, we would do an eligibility review and redaction. So staff would be looking at the applications to ensure that the applicants are nonprofits and meet the other baseline requirements that are outlined in the draft guidelines. From there, we're proposing to redact the applicants' names and information within like a summary page. But if that information is included within the application and describing the work that they're going to be doing, we wouldn't necessarily have capacity to redact all of it throughout every single page. So we did get some feedback that folks want it to be a little bit more of a neutral process. So we are proposing to start there so that it wouldn't immediately be obvious who had applied. But we appreciate feedback on that, just like everything else. And bear with me, there's only a couple more pages and then we can get into the discussion. So after the eligibility and redaction process is completed, step 2 would be the grant application assignment for the initial review period. And what we are proposing is to use randomization so that up to 30 applications is then assigned to those groups A through E. After the random assignment, we would check the conflict of interest statements that were provided by the members just to make sure that there weren't any conflicts. We would also provide a screening list to each group so that they could self-identify any potential conflicts that they may not have contemplated when they applied. Once that is done, anyone who needs to recuse themselves from reviewing a proposal, we would work to assign that proposal to an alternate, tracking any reassignments for transparency purposes. And then the number of applications each group reviews will vary based on how many are submitted. So if there's 150 divided by 5 groups, that's 30 applications per. We would like to cap it at 30 per group, but then you can see the necessity potentially to reduce the groups from 5 to 4 or to 3 to make sure that it's a reasonable amount of documents to review. We're proposing that applications will be split evenly amongst the groups. So if we got less than 150, we would just proceed with splitting them evenly until they were all assigned. And then we're proposing to provide copies of any redacted, we would provide copies of the redacted applications and review sheets for the reviewers to use to score independently. We're proposing to provide a minimum of 20 days for those reviewers to read through and score the grant applications. That's a minimum. And then the members who have scored would be advised to limit their review to the application materials provided and not independently research, contact applicants, or attempt to guess missing or unclear information. We also include language about submitting the preliminary review sheets by a deadline provided by Parks so that that information could be compiled. And again, it's preliminary. And staff would review those preliminary scores and just flag any where there may be some outliers. Let's say someone scored everyone a 1 and the rest of the group scored everyone various, 3, 4, 5. So that would be flagged, but no changes would be made by staff at all. That would be flagged for further discussion in the public process. We would be asking the ARC members keep the applications and scoring confidential during their initial review process, and that they would need to complete all of their reviews to be able to participate in the discussion meeting so that they had reviewed everything. Any incomplete scoring may be completed by an alternate, or if that was not an option, then it may be excluded from consideration just to make sure that everyone has a fair look at their proposals. So we did get a lot of feedback about clarifying questions during the initial review period. We heard that scorers wanted to be able to ask applicants questions, and so we drafted a proposed process for this. When reading any proposal, the members can submit any clarifying questions that they have for the applicant by a deadline using a link that Parks would provide. And then Parks would provide those questions to the applicant with a minimum of 5 days to respond and clarify. And then a copy of all of those responses and the questions that were submitted would be provided to the ARC during the review meeting so that everyone would have an opportunity to see what those questions and answers were. The conflict of interest and disclosure and recusal process is also mentioned here. And essentially, if anyone at any point during that initial review process identifies a conflict of interest or the perception of one, the ARC member shall notify park staff immediately of their need for recusal, and staff would record and reassign that proposal. So if someone started to read it and they saw maybe, their family member listed on the budget, they weren't aware that they were part of it, that might be, grounds for a recusal, and then we could process that. Okay, moving on to page 9, the step 3, the ARC application discussion meeting. So what we are proposing is that each review group would be scheduled for an ARC application discussion meeting. The meeting is estimated to last between 4 to 6 hours, depending on the number of applications under review. It would be held in a publicly accessible location, such as City Hall or a community center where there was microphones and things that we could set up. And the meeting facilitator would guide the group through the agenda, allotting equal time for all applications to be discussed one by one. An ARC member would be able to verbally comment on all of the proposals, but also would not be required to do so. They would need to be present, but they would not be required to make a verbal comment just in case they didn't wish to, or if they didn't have a comment or question on each proposal. So the general agenda for those public meetings would entail a brief welcome and introduction, an overview of the agenda and the process for the day. Then we would get into the grant application review and discussion period. Discussion for each of the applications would be timed to a maximum of 10 minutes per application. Seeing as how there would be 30 being discussed, there would be equal time for all. The facilitator would post the anonymized preliminary scores for discussion along with any clarifying information received as a result of those questions that I mentioned earlier. And following completion of each application discussed, members could submit their final scoring sheets. If they wish to change their scores based on any of the discussion or information during that meeting, they could do so, and they would do so anonymously by passing a card to the right or left or however we're seated, and everyone would pass a card, so there would not be a way to know who had changed what. We would then have a break, get back to it, another 120 minutes of reviewing, approximately 12 applications if they each take around 10 minutes. Another break with a meal provided for the ARC members. Go back to 90 minutes and reviewing 9 proposals, and then achieve closing remarks thereafter. We're proposing a very structured process because we know that there are a lot of applications to review. We're asking for a lot of time from the ARC members, but we also know that discussion can be very important to help clarify or better understand and score things. But following a structured process would ensure that there's equal time given to all grantees and ensure that it's competitive and fair in that way. All right, last page, and then we can get into questions. We are proposing to make space for observation by the public. What we're proposing is that members of the public could attend the review meetings online as an observer via Zoom. We're proposing that public comment would not be taken and observer discussion would not be permitted. We also are including language about no actions being taken by any party to influence or interfere with the meeting or scoring. If an individual or group willfully interrupts the meeting and order cannot be restored, we're proposing that scoring may be paused and the room may be cleared. Parks understands that not everyone has access to Zoom, and so we're also proposing to make available a viewing location, such as a community center, for those with limited access. So the scoring process would be recorded and available via Zoom, but even if it's held at another location, we are asking that observers be mindful of any physical or auditory gestures which might inadvertently influence the process, and really be there to observe versus the interaction. So we felt that there were a lot of comments about making it a public process, but we also want to make sure that the scorers feel comfortable and there is not any undue influence. Finally, once all of the scores were compiled, they would be tabulated and then ranked. So after all of the discussion meetings are completed, the final scores would be entered into a spreadsheet for each of the applications across each of the scoring groups. This would produce a total score for each application. Those total scores would then be divided by the number of reviewers to generate an average score for each application. and those scores would be used to log, they would be logged to the second decimal and used then to rank. We understand that there may be some ties that occur, and so if there are ties between applications using this method and there's not enough funding for all of the tied proposals, we're recommending that the tied proposals be chosen using a lottery. Drawing randomly selection with those, yep. And then at the end, you'll see there just a commitment to a competitive and transparent process. The grant application review and scoring process shall be conducted in a competitive and transparent manner without interference of any kind, and no form of discrimination, harassment, intimidation, or retaliation will be tolerated at any point in the process. Engaging in any of these behaviors may result in dismissal or disqualification. So if we want to take it back to page 1, or if you have questions you'd like to discuss or feedback you'd like to provide.
I have some questions. I don't normally sit here. I think that's what it is. I don't normally sit here. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I'm down a little bit. It feels a little weird. But how much is the stipend that we're proposing to pay the reviewers?
That's not currently included. What do you think would be a reasonable amount based on the hours required?
I might catch a lot of flack for this, for saying it, but none of us get paid to be here, and we're here all the time. None of us serving on any committees or commissions for the city of Fresno receives a stipend. So I'm looking to hear a number from you guys, since it's proposed and it's currently in the guidelines, the draft guidelines.
If we want to just throw a number out there, starting point, I think there's a lot of time that's going to go into the rate as you see, Shelby explained. Long days, long hours, and a lot that we're asking of the reviewers. We've kind of contemplated maybe it's a $500 stipend that the raters get, because it's a big commitment, and it's a crucial component of this. So that's a number that we've kind of kicked around. Not sure where that sits with potential raters, but that's something that we've talked about.
I think that's fair. Looking at it, so it'd be $500 per member, right? So we're looking at 30 members.
That's correct.
Okay.
Based off the proposal, yes.
And can you explain? This is kind of new to me, being involved on this part. Can you explain the breakout of the groups, Group A, Group B, Group C? So you have certain groups reviewing applicants as they come in?
So what we would propose is to, we would have 30 reviewers total, right? And then we would split them in, and Cheyenne, if you wouldn't mind putting the graphic up, I think it helps some people. We would split them into groups of 5. Once all the applications come in, each group of 5 is going to get 30 proposals to review approximately. So then all 5 people will read those 30 and score it. And then there would be a group of 5 alternates available if someone in group A says, I have a conflict and need to recuse myself. So then we would work to reassign it to one of the alternates.
Okay. I'm trying to understand. So if, how will the schedule be made? So would Group A be responsible for reviewing 10 applicants, Group B, 10 applicants, Group C, 10 applicants? How would that happen?
So Group A would review 30, Group B would review 30, C 30, and then if we got more than 150 applications, we would add additional scoring groups and make the group membership as small as 3 people. So they would basically get the training, and then they would have copies of all 30 applications in a stack. And then they would have scoring sheets for each of those, and they would independently go through to score over a several-week period, at least 20 days minimum. So assuming that they would read maybe 1.5 to 2 applications a day, at a reasonable pace, right? But then they would need to submit the scoring sheet, which would include comments that they had to kind of demonstrate that they'd reviewed it, but also the basis for their scores. Then that group comes together on that 6 to 8 hour day and goes through every single one by one, using a similar fashion as to what I've done, really. We're proposing a very structured process. Think jury duty, think very, very formal, so that they've read it ahead of time, but then they're coming in to go over each of them to ensure that there's a public process. And then all of their scoring sheets that they complete would then be made available to the applicant after the cycle is done, so that they could learn, how did the scorers interpret what I had shared, and so they each would have quite a heavy workload to get through all of those materials.
And what would the training include for them? Would it be like how to read a budget, understanding what cultural arts means to different demographic groups? Like, what would that training consist of?
So those very things. Right now, we've seen a lot of comments coming in about what type of training the community and anyone submitting the comments feels would be helpful. Looking at a budget, how to look at a budget, how to use a scoring rubric, what's an example of something that might score high based on what the rubric says, where to access the culture arts plan to know what the plan defines as arts and culture. So it would really be a several hour session to go through all of those things that are being identified right now in public comment. Once we have all of those comments, we're going to start to fold that into this document as well as the guidelines, so that we can add clarity on all the topics that would be covered.
And how would the interview process go? Would the commission or the subcommittee see the interview questions for the reviewers before they are interviewed for those positions to provide feedback?
So you asked really good questions, and I'm so glad you asked it, because one of the questions I had for the subcommittee is in selecting the reviewers. We know that the grant guidelines has a high-level list, and that list obviously will be updated based on public comment of what type of representation needs to be on that scoring group. But the question I have is, since PRAC is hearing appeals, do you all think that PRAC should be involved in selecting the scoring committee, or do you want to remain outside of that so that you can hear the appeals? I don't have a personal preference. I just want to make sure that we're offering a competitive and transparent process. So how do you think we should handle that?
We can't do both. It has to be one or the other.
It doesn't necessarily. Obviously, we can run legal opinions and things, but to what level do you feel that PRAC should oversee?
I would like to be involved. I can't speak for anybody else, but I would like to be involved in the interviewing process, because it's very important to me that anyone that we select, any of the 30 people that we select, that they really understand what culture means to all demographics. We are a very diverse city, a very diverse community. Our arts community is a very diverse community, and people need to understand what art means to those communities. Last year, as we reviewed and seen some of the applicants that didn't make it, it was based off of, well, hair braiding is not culture. Well, in my culture, hair braiding is culture, right? Hair braiding and costume dancing and things like that are culture in different cultures. So I would like to be involved in the interview process just to ask those type of questions. Do you know what culture means in the Hmong community? Do you know what culture means in the Hispanic community? Do you know what arts and culture means in the African American community? Just to hear those responses will determine if I will select that person or not, because I want a fairer and a transparent process this time versus the last 2 rounds. So I know I'm already spread thin, but I gotta have my foot in everything right now just to make sure that this process is very transparent and that we're accountable.
Yeah, and we can, I know we're logging all of your comments, so we can definitely get a legal opinion. I know that the bylaws outline certain roles, and so I want to make sure that we're adhering to the bylaws and everything and not put you in a position where we aren't.
And if I can't, that's fine. I could be a part of the appeal process, whichever process, but I prefer both, right? For me, I prefer both. So,
That's helpful.
okay. And then I have more questions. So, how would it be if we have certain, or if we have park commissioners who are fiscal sponsors for some of the applicants? How would that work? Would they have to recuse themselves from certain things because they're fiscal sponsors, or what is the process?
So that would require a legal opinion. I know that all commissioners fill out Form 700s and have some disclosures initially, but we would have to run that through legal because that may be, a conflict of interest if that's what they determine.
Okay. Let's see. I didn't write down any other questions, but can you run that through legal and get back to me on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, on page 3, where you're talking about the 4 to 8 hours of training, I was wondering if you had a sense, is that going to be done independently or online, or is this going to be an in-person training or in a group setting?
My preference would be that it be in person to ensure that folks are able to fully engage. I understand that may, is obviously a time commitment, but with the compensation that may make it more feasible for people. But we would like to have those be in person with sign-in sheets, and just so we can ensure that everyone had fully completed it versus maybe an online module where if anyone's multitasking, right? So we just want to make sure that it's well attended and folks can ask questions and feel like they're well equipped.
Okay, great. Let's see, on what page was this? On page 8, I really like the clarifying question process. I just want to understand a little bit more about how you see that working. It looks like each pool of reviewers is going to get like a mixed randomized assignment of all different kinds of applications that they're going to review. When they're doing their preliminary determinations or preliminary scoring independent process, they can contact your department with questions that come up, and then the applicant themselves will have at least 5 days to respond to those questions to you. And then it says a copy of all the responses received by the deadline are going to be provided to all the members during the review meeting. So everybody's going to get everybody's questions and responses. Is that?
That's what the intent is. If you have feedback on how that should look, if it should look any differently. But the intent would be that everyone would have access to those questions and responses so that everyone makes an informed decision.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I mean, I know that each group's going to have, I think, up to 10 minutes to discuss each application. So if you're directing them to like, hey, on this one, this is the question that came, or the questions that came up. I don't know how you're organizing it if it's so randomized and spread out, But
yes,
to make sure that they're considering that when they're engaging in this group discussion 10-minute process to make a final scoring decision.
Would you recommend that those questions and responses be distributed ahead of the meeting so that the scorers could review them ahead of time?
I don't know. I guess I just wasn't sure with timing how it was going to work. It seems like people are going to be doing a first pass review. They're going to participate in a group discussion. They are not compelled to participate if they don't want to or don't want, have anything they want to share. Then they have the opportunity to make a change in their scoring if they would like to, but they're not required to. You're going to have the same issue come up that it sounds like, it came up in round 2, where people were getting their comments back and saying, but that's not what was discussed, or this was different, it doesn't accurately reflect my project. They got the preliminary assessment or preliminary scoring, and it wasn't updated or changed, by supplemental discussion, or they didn't get further written comments or feedback. Sounds like now there's going to be an opportunity to observe the discussion and still get the preliminary comments, but a lot of what I heard after round 2 discussions on people who were appealing their non-funding determination or something like that, they had issues with what were essentially the independent preliminary scoring written comments, which is going to go back now. So I wasn't sure if maybe if this clarifying question process is going to take place, which sounds really helpful, that maybe the reviewers have a chance to look at that and maybe includes, something in whatever is their written comments that are then going to go back to those applicants.
Yeah, so if they're changing, so let's say they get a copy of those questions and answers, and that based on that and the discussion that's held, they want to increase or decrease whatever scoring that they had preliminarily given, they would do so using a standard form that would then be available. So we're wanting to make this a very standard process so that the applicants can get a copy of those scoring sheets, whether that be preliminary or if there's changes, both copies. As a grant writer previously, I often benefited from scoring sheets that I got on my grant proposals so I could see kind of how people had interpreted what I had communicated. So we're hearing in the comments that that's what the community would like to see. So I know the details are in the weeds and logistically there's lots of questions, but essentially our intent is to collect that information in a transparent fashion, redact it so that the scorers, their names and stuff isn't included on it, and then provide it to the applicants so that they can get a better understanding of where they landed and why. We also got feedback that commenting with the scores is really important, so creating space on that sheet for that as well would be helpful to the applicants.
Okay, and then on that page where you have that if there's outlier scoring for an application, it will signal a need for discussion, and you said it would be in the public process. Is that if you have, some applications coming in with high scores and low scores, that's going to come up at the group discussion where it's the 10 minutes to discuss that specific application? Is that where that happens?
Yeah, so what I'm envisioning, and that's not quite on here, but is essentially you'd have a PowerPoint. Let's say we're using this room hypothetically. The PowerPoint shows, okay, application number 1, here's the preliminary score spread. We do notice that there's a wide range. We're going to go to each panelist. You each would have some time to discuss it, keeping the total discussion to 10 minutes. Are there any comments or questions regarding this score range? Typically, when folks are scoring, scores will vary, and so it's fine for scores to vary. The only reason this is noted is because we've gotten the feedback in the listening sessions that, someone might be afraid that their friend's going to score everyone low so that, someone else gets scored. And certainly our recusal and our formal process should weed some of that out. However, if a scorer has scored every single application all ones, it's worth pointing out and discussing with the group to see, why. So that is noted there just as a tool to assess like any huge disparities. But again, the scores should not all be the same, certainly. And we would then have this structured, okay, application number 2, anyone have any comments, allowing space for everyone, and then, pass your revisions if you have your sheet, and then we'll compile it next application. So we're envisioning a very, very structured process so that folks can follow along and see how it's being conducted.
Okay, great. And then my last question was on page 10. It has to do with the public observation process, where you have item 12. It sounds like what you're attempting to do is for people who can't independently access Zoom for the observation and viewing, you're going to make like an overflow room available where people can gather and then watch on like a screen or see. But I'm not clear from the way there's audience reaction noted if it would be on the same premises as where the discussion is being held, or if it's going to be in a public space that's not the same place as where the the members of the ARC are having their group discussion?
Ideally, it would be at 2 different locations, just to avoid any, any potential influence. But that is included on the off chance that, say, we were meeting in 2065 and this space was being used for the overflow. So that's a general expectation, but ideally we would have it at separate locations, just depending on the space availability. But if you have a recommendation or preference, welcome those comments.
I think that was all my comments for now, but thank you.
One more question. I know last meeting there was a discussion of a unique ID being given to applicants to where they would be able to review their application, receive any documents, any feedback. When the scoring sheets are available, would they only be able to see their scoring sheets, or will the whole public be able to see their scoring sheets? One, and if not the whole public, would they be sent to them and they be able to access those scoring sheets with their unique ID?
So we're working with our information services department to build what we're referring to as a portal, and it should house the application. It should house a notification of appeal. I know we talked about that in a prior meeting. It should house the scoring sheets so that you could log in and see. I will note, as was noted in our prior meeting in the guidelines, we are subject to public records, PRAs, and so our intention would be to share the scoring sheets with the applicants directly using their portal. But depending on if there were public requests that came in, we would defer to the city attorney's office as they review what would be required to disclose. But our intention would just be to make it available to the grantees.
My fear is that I can request your scoring sheets and I can look at your scoring sheets and look at my scoring sheets and feel that my project is better than yours and it could have scored higher than the points that was given. I think that's like sensitive material, sensitive documents, and I think that should be given to the applicant. But again, if it's a request from the public and it's public records, I do understand, but I just think that's a sensitive area right there. So I just want to go on record and say that.
Yeah, and we are creating space for appeals at several stages. So in the guidelines that are drafted, there's space for appeals if there's a determination that you aren't eligible to apply. There's space for appeals if you're not recommended for award, and there's space for appeals if you're not selected for the scoring committee. So there's 3 types of appeals that can come before PRAC. And we, with all requests, defer to city attorney. They do make efforts to obviously redact sensitive information. I will say that in past rounds, the list of all the applications and their scores, their total scores, is published, and that's pretty standard. But should that arise, thank you for sharing your perspective on that.
Is it possible for our next subcommittee that we have presence of our city attorney so we can get answers to some of the questions that they may have to give to us for guidance, for them to be present at our next meeting? Or is that asking too much? I'm always pressing the line.
We can certainly request it. I know city attorney is present at the PRAC meeting. All of the questions that you are asking that have a legal determination, we typically will submit a request for legal services. So we do have a process. We can certainly ask. At times, some questions have to be researched before they can be responded to as well. So if they're not available, we are taking note, and we'll maybe we provide a summary memo to you. Just to make sure that
Yeah, I think that'd be best, Chair. If you all have any legal questions, get them to us. We'll get them through the process and then provide you that response back based on their opinion.
Yeah, but we wouldn't know if it was a legal question, just like right now, know, right? So,
right.
When they are present at our parks meeting, we're able to sometimes get that answer answered right there, that question answered right there on the spot. So it will kind of be helpful. not all the time if it's not possible, but sometimes for them to be present, like for the, I think the last listening session is coming up. So for them to be able to be present at the next subcommittee to be able to answer any questions that may arise that may need some legal advice on would be helpful. Just throwing it out there. And I don't have any more questions. If you have something to say.
No, I would just say we'll look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, so now we're gonna move on to our hearing, ID number 26-555. Hearing to receive public input on expanding access to arts and cultural grant program for cycle 3. Would any member of the public like to make a comment regarding this item? You will have up to 3 minutes for a comment, and I would please need you guys to fill out a card to be able to make public comments on this item. My first card is from Johannes.
Thank you, Subcommittee. Hi, Johannes Reinders, background in public engagement, equity, and tribal affairs. Just a gentle nudge for equitable engagement. I would advise the City of Fresno to be extremely careful regarding California privacy and notice of collection of pressuring people to provide personal information. We live in the time of ICE, so just a bit of sensitivity around asking brown people to put their names and things. Just clarify that it's optional. Thank you. Regarding the Measure P ordinance, again, I want to say more strongly, you must delay the NOFA now. The timeline for giving feedback for the ARC guidelines is absolutely absurd. It's approximately a week, as opposed to the grant guidelines themselves that allowed for 30 days, which again we're communicating to you is not enough. Once again, section of the Measure P ordinance 4B. Grants funded pursuant to this paragraph shall be implemented by the Commission in partnership with Fresno Arts Council or its successor local arts agency. The city has already broken this ordinance, and it was deemed very acceptable, which it should be because of all of the bad actions committed by Fresno Arts Council and the termination of that contract. Because of the bad actions by Fresno Arts Council and the termination of their contract, those extenuating circumstances must also be given to this NOFA. It must be delayed. Otherwise, it will be a lawsuit either way. The question is which one you actually have a chance of defending against, and it's clear that the extenuating circumstances are the ones you can defend against. Regarding the ARC itself, ARC sessions must be viewed in person. Page 10, item 12 of that supplement, it should be parks shall allow it to be viewed in person. Again, this is about undoing all of the lack of transparency that was extant during Fresno Arts Council's bad actions. ARC must have more than just 30 applicants. This outlines 30 applications reviewed by each individual. Those were the same mistakes made by Fresno Arts Council. It must be more. Frankly, it should be double. No individual panelist should be expected to deal with more than 15 applications. Otherwise, we're going to have the same problems as last time. And they must be paid. I think you should be paid as well. I think a stipend is reasonable and accessible. Otherwise, only affluent Fresnans will be engaged. Only the Fresnans that have money and the time to come to these things will be able to engage. Finally, regarding the grant guidelines and the fiscal sponsor, you must not only expand the eligibility for more fiscal sponsors, but you must also facilitate expanding those fiscal sponsors. Otherwise, this will be a lawsuit. We need to allow non-art fiscal sponsors to sponsor applications, and we need to recruit them. You need to recruit them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker will be Tricia.
Hi, my name is Tricia Baeza. We were awarded this past year. I'm from Pacifica Arts Project. We're a Polynesian dance and arts and culture organization. I just wanted to speak on two things. One thing that Johannes just said about fiscal sponsors and being able to have things expanded. Our little organization, there's only like a handful of us right now. We've only been a 501c3 for 16 months. So if it wasn't for Measure P really helping us, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done so far. But we did have support from other nonprofits to kind of start what we were doing. And I just know that it would be very beneficial to have others to help someone else come along the way somebody helped us come along. And so I think to what he just said was really crucial. The other part I just wanted to mention, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, I might have missed part of it about eligibility. For instance, we got a good part of our money very late into the holidays. So our original project, one of the projects that we had planned to do, the time had already lapsed 3 months before. So we're going to have, an issue for us unless we do something to be able to be eligible, because we won't have had that third event. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that for people like us, that we got our funds late. June 30th, maybe we wouldn't have the time, but I don't want that to exclude us from being able to apply this time. Let's see. Yeah, and I think that's it. I also just agree with if there's any way to extend timelines so that folks can be able to explain and talk and being able to have input on this process. I think that's really important, and all of us, I think, would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Hugo Morales.
Terrace in Fresno. I'm also the co-director of Radio Bilingüe. And I have a comment on the physical sponsorship. Physical sponsors should not be limited in the number of physical sponsees they may support or apply on behalf of. This is an access issue. Fresno has a limited number of qualified physical sponsors with the infrastructure, experience, and administrative systems needed to provide the service. For that reason, it is important that the organizations that are able to serve this role be allowed to respond to community needs. Physical sponsors should also be understood as professional administrative service, not as an additional capacity building outcome. The responsibilities involved include accounting, compliance, reporting, fund management, and ongoing administrative support. The current 10% physical sponsor fee is not sufficient to cover the full cost of providing the services, particularly given the level of accounting and reporting required in the process. On the application review and scoring process, I'm glad that there is some thought of compensation. I think that the compensation should be more like $600 or more, considering the responsibility involved in this. And also the limit of 10 minutes may be difficult to maintain. I think it should be more like 10 to 15 minutes, considering the importance of that dialogue that's to happen in person. It's imperative that the reviewers meet, discuss the applications, and make the rankings as a group. A collective review process allows panelists to discuss their criteria, share perspectives across different areas of expertise, and ensure the applications are being evaluated consistently and fairly. It is also imperative that these review meetings be open to the public as proposed. This kind of discussion is especially important in the arts and culture funding, where reviewers may bring different knowledge and perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this name is really hard to pronounce. I can't read the writing on it, but I'm gonna try, and please forgive me for butchering up the name. So again, please forgive me for butchering up the name, but I do believe the last name is Day. I think it's you, yep. And I apologize.
Don't worry, my name is pretty long. It's completely fine.
Can you go ahead and state it for the record, please?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Sahasawati Samsaksi. Thank you, Subcommittee, for giving me your time. I actually want to comment on item 10B. I noticed something I noticed with digital outreach is that, like, although the the numbers of interactions with like the post that the Parks Department put out were pretty decent. Like, it's still incongruent with the turnout to the prior to listing sessions. And I'd also know, and like, just going through like the overall parks account, if it weren't for the highlightings from other community organizations like Labyrinth Art Collective or Dolce Up Front, I wouldn't have known about any of this, because maybe it's because of how my algorithm has been catered. But whenever I see the parks, anything from the Parks Department, it's a lot of like all the outdoor activities are upcoming for summer, rather than them trying to reach out to communities. So I urge the department to look into how other ways to reach out to community, like without having to rely on other organizations. Like, for example, adding in hashtags that although I don't have any formal experience in marketing or education, I have managed multiple accounts for multiple organizations in the past before. And I have and with those organizations, there was more outreach and engagement whenever we added in like hashtags for kind of like broad but also still niche hashtags in order for our community to be able to engage with us. So I urge the department to look into making sure that these hearings are known about without having to rely so much on outside orgs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker will be Smiley. Three minutes.
3 minutes. When I hear the beep, is that done?
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. My name is Smiley G, EAC performing artist, grant recipient for the second tier, fiscally sponsored by Dulce Up Front. Thank you, Aaron and Shelby, for being here. Thank you, Kimberly and Laura. Now, I hear a lot from Shelby, especially last time. Are you the one focusing on this, or is Aaron going to be able to decide over? How does that work? I guess, I don't know if this is monitored by the Brown Act, so I don't know. I'm not expecting you to respond to me, but Aaron's kind of quiet. Shelby, you're talking a lot. I like it, but I just don't know the dynamics. I see two different papers here. I see 10D, ID 26553, discussion for cycle 3, but then I see another paper here about the 10B, ID 26551. I'm guessing this is the current one, and this is for the next session. I don't know. I just want to quickly say that, like I said last time, in the other room a couple weeks ago, I think it would be a disenfranchisement to the community if we make this next round only available to people who have C3s, 501c3s. I'm still unclear as how we're going to move forward on this. I just think, like I said last time, it would be, it would nullify the idea of engagement and expanse to the arts. Expanded access to arts cannot just be for a selected few in the city, for people that have already been established. And so that's crucial, because if that goes forward, you're gonna X out half of the people that this grant is intended for. Look, this is not about entertainment. It's not about how much good opera or dancing we could provide for the community. It's about expanding access to arts and culture. It's about involving the community. And you're not going to get that from people that are only people at 501c3s. You're not going to get that. Like I said last time, some of your best artists, you know, they don't got 501c3s, and they're maybe not the most upstanding citizens in the community, but they will expand arts to the community. And that's what this is about. I want you all to please focus on the heart of this grant, this 30-year grant for our community.
Thank you. Next speaker, Stephen Wilson. Is it Stephen or Stephan? Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Stephen Wilson from the Fresno Philharmonic. First of all, I want to commend the Parks Department staff, particularly Shelby, for the quality and the speed of the work they are doing. It's very impressive. I know more about Cycle 3 than I ever knew about Cycles 1 and 2. And so this is really terrific. Regarding the concerns about the timeline, I would just stress to everybody that delay is also a problem. And so regardless of the legal status of the June 30 deadline, delaying the process and the funding going out will create real harm as well. My specific comments about the ARC handbook are regarding page 10. Just to highlight what I think is a policy question. Once the applications are scored and ranked, they then need to be matched to a funding recommendation that lines up with the amount of funds that are available. And maybe it needs to be clarified who is going to do that and how that's going to work. Is park staff going to make an initial funding recommendation and then that goes to the subcommittee, or exactly how? Because obviously and also the question of under which score there's a decision that below this score you don't get funding. That there are lots of, that once everything is ranked, then there are a number of decisions that need to be made to get to an actual grant amount for each application. And it's not really clear in here how that process is happening. It seems to stop right at the ranking portion. So just to raise that maybe that needs to be clarified in a future draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
Yes, I have Elizabeth Laval. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, Elizabeth, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. I just have a couple of one clarifying question. In the past rounds, the ranking panels were given different, for example, Gen Ops emerging or Gen Ops established, and the same with the project. Is this proposal to mix that up so that each scoring panel would have a variety of types of grants that they would be scoring? And then you can answer that when I'm finished. But I just wanted to say also that one of the things that could be moved on toward the future is something that Stephen Wilson was referring to. You know, most of those people that end up as fiscal sponsors are Gen Ops recipients. And if in the future, I don't know if it could happen this round, we are mostly on a fiscal year that starts July 1. What if it's possible in some future way to put the Gen Ops on the fiscal year and have the projects on the calendar year? One of the things that would do for us as a fiscal sponsor, which we've done both cycles and intend to continue with in the third cycle and more, is to get we know what we were getting, and that would determine how many organizations we could fiscally sponsor. We could potentially rise from 6 to 10 if we knew ahead of time and could put those funds, because part of what we do with our Measure of P funds are fiscally sponsor at least 6 organizations every year. So by doing that, if it could be separated, we would have a better chance to reach out to many people who weren't 501c3s and continue mentoring them. That the fiscal sponsor designation is a serious thing to take on. As Mr. Morales pointed out, it involves multiple layers, fiscal, training, mentorship, and that could be helped greatly by organizations knowing what they were getting so they could put the part of that toward fiscally sponsoring up and coming groups or individuals, and that might be a really good way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online?
Yes, I have Amy Kitchener. Amy, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Subcommittee and Parks Department, for all your work on this process. I have 5 items. We'll see how I go here. But number 1, I just speak with a lot of you here to extend the timeline. You know, that let's remember that we do have grants in this fiscal year, and for most of us, we only got funding in October. So that should meet the ordinance requirement of making grants on an annual basis. Like, there's more time until the year passes that the grants were made. Number 2, I noticed that the application questions and the budget requirements were not provided in the draft guidelines. And this is a significant omission, which has important bearing on the grants process, because those very questions need to align with the rubric and the scoring. So the guidelines are therefore not complete, and these application questions and other requirements need to be available for public review and comment. Third, I would like to speak about the allocations and suggest that there's a way for the money to be allocated proportionally by the demand. Okay, so it's really not fair to have a process where some applicants, let me explain about what happened last time. There was a very large variance between the percent of applicants funded by category. So the category with the largest pool and percent of funding was established general operating, and 96% of the applicants were funded in that pool, totaling 3.1 million. Then in contrast, the category with the lowest percent of applicants funded was emerging project support. And in that category, only 54% of the applicants were funded, for a total of 1.07 million. So this is not an equitable process, and the applicants need to be applying in a level playing field where their funding can be determined with community need and demand as part of the allocation of the big pools. Also, that religious nonprofit organizations are really critical providers of arts and cultural programs in our community. Like, not every community has its own arts organization. You know, at Alliance for California Traditional Arts, over time, we've worked with a lot of churches, a lot of, I think about all the work in different Southeast Asian communities. Like, we've worked with the Modesto Buddhist Temple, for example, is the home of where all the Cambodian dancing is, right? So they serve as trusted community spaces, and they may have the infrastructure needed to support culturally relevant programming. So excluding them also really limits access for communities that rely on these organizations. And then lastly, pay the panelists a little.
That is your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online?
There's no one else online.
Okay. Next speaker, Raul Reyes.
Hello, how's it going? My name is Raul Reyes, for the record. Thank you guys for being here. It's my first time coming to these meetings, and it's very informative, and I'm really learned a lot today. While looking at the guidelines, though, there was something that I kind of flagged, and it had something to do with the clarifying questions during the initial review period. I wanted to know if there is what timing you guys have for those questions, because are reviewers expected to submit those scores before those responses are received? Because I'm curious about that fine line between clarification and supplementation. So for example, if an applicant has a specific budget that covers 1,000 people, but it needs more, that would be a clarifying question. But if, for example, in the application there is a outreach plan that's really weak, and the question is asked, can you reiterate or clarify more about the outreach plan, but they give more information, is that new information going to be part of the scoring process? Is that going to be considered? Those are just my concerns about that specific part. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now go ahead and close public comment. Does any member of the subcommittee have any questions or comments regarding this item?
No, thank you.
I don't either.
Oh, I know I had kind of indicated that I want to do public comment.
Okay, can you state your name? I'm going to go ahead and open it back up, but I need you to state your name, even if it's just your first name.
Nikki.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll start with the fact that I have 2 of these people on staff coming up to me and pressing me for my info when clearly, I think that's known, that that's not a given, I don't have to do anything like that. And as far as decisions being made, it's funny to me. It's not really funny. It's kind of ugly seeing that some people who feel entitled to make decisions are not even don't feel like they're required to know the law. And so if you care about something or you want to know something, it's your job to do the homework. And so, and good luck with city council being at your disposal, because they could barely handle their own. There have been in court with IA allegations from the court, hiring third parties. So yeah, it sounds like you guys, maybe this group came here expecting this group to have more of knowing what they wanted, because there's nothing that really you guys depend on each other to have the answers already. Or maybe the community could do a better job, or that's what we need, because some input, maybe some ideas from the community, because it's not coming out really right here. Yeah, and anybody who, I get rubbed the wrong way, and I get really maybe pissed when people want to make decisions for people and that are not allowing us our due process and stuff like that. So.
Thank you. I will now close public comment. It is 7:23. As I do on our regular Parks meeting, I would like to adjourn the meeting in the love and memory of Dr. Francine Apuda, who is deeply missed, and I knew that if she was here, she would be a part of this subcommittee and be able to guide this process a little better. Thank you for coming out again tonight, and enjoy the rest of your time with your family. Thank you.